us remotely as well and watching this. We're now in the public section of our meeting. We've had a really good closed session where we're going to discuss some other matters which for different reasons we cannot put in a public domain. But hopefully you'll be able to get some good insight in terms of what we do during this segment. Now, I'll start off with an update on the Police and Crime Plan and the launch and delivery of that. At the moment, we have the Police and Crime Plan document, which we are now awaiting a paper from the Police and Crime panel to let us know their thoughts officially of the plan that was presented to them last week, Thursday. I was with them for about 2.5 hours. It was great fun. We got to talk in more details about the outcomes of the public consultations that we held that informed the Police and Crime Plan, which obviously have been agreed with the force as well. So we are quite confident that we'll be able to start working on these and to go live in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, there's some really good things in there around community policing, around the retention and recruitment of police officers, and also around other services that we'll be providing to help tackle some of the causes of serious violence in our communities. So that would be absolutely fantastic to see that happening. But also, I just wanted to be on record to thank Gary, Trevor, and all the other officers in Bedfordshire Police for their support, especially around the Summer of Fun program. I've been aware of the boxing and the martial arts that's been going on. It's been really, really good to see the Asian team and the community police officers also joining in as well. So on our behalf, please thank all the officers for their support with this. It's been absolutely fantastic. Now we'll move on to item number 10 on the agenda on community policing, and I think
yes, sorry to interrupt. I just wonder if I might, just coming on the back of your comments there, just thank you and the office for your engagement with us in the preparation of the policing plan. And I think what we've got is a really good product that will enable us to have some really focused and effective activity over the next 3 years, and we're really grateful for the way that the team's interacted with us in putting that together and responded to the issues that we've raised in that as well. So I think we're in a really good place with it and really pleased with the Summer of Fun stuff. That's gone really well, and we'll take that back to our offices. So
thank you very much. Now we want to item number 10 on the agenda, which is around community policing model and an update on the establishments of the community policing.
Yeah, this relates to our community policing hubs that we've got across the 3 CSP areas across Bedfordshire. The establishment of PC roles is at 67. Our current strength sits at 59, and that's a shortfall of 8. We know that 4 should be going into post next week. So that leaves 4, and there's recruitment currently ongoing to fill those other 4 vacancies. So as you'll see, we're getting to a really healthy space there. But just to put some support around there, those community hubs are also supported by PCSOs, of which we've got 45 out of 47 aligned to those community hubs. And again, there will be further recruitment for PCSOs in the autumn. And then finally, as we've already heard in the closed session, we've got 53 special constables that are also aligned to our community policing teams.
Thank you. Where it says that 59 includes 3 that act as police sergeants, are they counted in 59 or are they counted in the 10 that's above?
They're counted in 59.
In 59, okay, so 56 at the minute then.
As constables, yeah?
Yeah. So 56, and we're still looking for October to get to the 67.
we're hopeful.
Thank you. And it doesn't include police now, does it? Anymore? They're not in those figures.
I think they are, yeah.
They are. So is that 9?
So yeah, I think it's 9 in this group, yeah.
So I think the plan then will be that when the police now officers move on to another project, they will be replaced.
There'll be more police now coming in to pick up that role. So we've got police now for next year as well.
Okay. So for the moment, we're at 47.
And also in terms of focus on community proactive policing, is the plan that these officers, once they're all in place, they will be dedicated to community policing? Of course, I know there will be operational prerogatives that could come in every now and again, that doesn't mean they deploy elsewhere. I think the plan is for them to be primarily focused on.
So absolutely, I always caveat this, but absolutely the plan is those are dedicated community policing resource that should be focused on local priorities, local initiatives and local problem solving. Now obviously, that's not to say if they are a dedicated resource in Dunstable and there is something that falls slightly outside their remit that's just around the corner from where they are, then we would expect them to deal with that. And likewise, if a plane was to fall out of the sky or something terrible was to happen in that respect, then we would reserve the right to draw those in for any period of time to assist us to deal with a large-scale emergency or something similar. But fundamentally, the role of the community officers is protected to focus on local priorities and to deliver those long-term problem-solving solutions in a sustained way.
Can I also ask you, I mean, more on the deployment side of things? I must say I have seen some really fun, because I spend a lot of time on social media, obviously. I have seen some really fantastic reports from some of our community police teams where they've been doing foot patrols. And I've got to just call out one I think it's in Bedford, where the officer did a video over a weekend of him patrolling Bedford. I think it was in Queen's Park area, if memory serves me right, and it was part of a priority setting agenda by virtue of him actually physically patrolling that area. By the weekend, a lot of the problems that residents had reported that there are problem drinking and antisocial behaviour had moved away. And it was so fantastic, actually reading the comment section, a member of the public thanking the officers because they themselves had actually seen the impact of the foot patrols, of the visible presence of the officer. And can we have more of that, please? Well, not so much the video, I don't mind the videos, that's fine, I always call them out. I'm sure not all the officers want to do videos and social media, but I'm talking more about that, foot patrols.
Well, that's a brilliant representation of exactly how community policing should work. So, community policing teams should be plugged into their local communities to identify what their local and immediate concerns are and what are the best local solutions that are in place to deliver against those priorities once they're identified. Very often that will be around visibility and concerns around antisocial behaviour, nuisance behaviour, very often speeding and that sort of thing. And our community officers are empowered and will support them with additional resources if need be to deliver on those local priorities. So if that's what local communities say they wanted, then those community resources are there to deliver exactly that. And the social media part of it is an important part of it as well in terms of the visibility of what we're doing. We're looking at developing a social media academy now, so we can identify some of that good practice and then spread that in a more systematic way across all of our community policing teams. There's some developments that we've got to a potential digital desk as well, where community policing will flux in and out of that to make sure we're getting good engagement with community policing on a regular basis through that digital media desk.
Well, I'll be happy to volunteer my enthusiastic expertise to the social media academy as well, if it's ever needed, of course. Not like it would be, but there you go.
Okay, well, thanks for everything.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to number 11 on the agenda. That's you.
Commissioner, thank you. So on the victim needs analysis, which the force agreed to deliver with us, we've got 29 areas to deliver. We've only got 6 left, so we are well on target for achieving this by the end of the financial year, which is what we all agreed. So that is a really nice news piece. Thank you for working with us. There's one core area that we just can't finish off, which is this victim journey mapping work. We know you've started it and even finished, we just don't have access to it because it's based on SharePoint. If we could get that, that would really help us finish those last 6 sections. So where there's a bit of a blocker there, it would be great if we could have that if possible.
I'm sure we can facilitate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving into 11.2, which is the signpost update. As a bit of an offering, we've given you a paper that's a bit different this time on where we are with capacity in signposts, what they're currently doing, what the opportunity is moving forward for areas that they may wish to cover. This is in response to the ask that we had around the force wanting to look at a victim hub. We did go to the meeting. Unfortunately, there was a decision made for a model without looking at options. So I've said that we don't want to be involved in that, but we will give you all the information you would need is why we're bringing you that paper to have, so you know what capacity or what we're looking at for the future is in Signpost. But the idea of just moving to something without really understanding the problem is a bit of a problem for myself, because it brings us into 11.3, which was us really understanding what the issues are for victim care at the moment. We wouldn't understand it fully because understandably we don't have the survey up and running, but the procurement process is nearly complete, and then there's going to be the whole bill. I would suggest that you would want to wait and look for what are our victims telling us before we move to a model, but it is your decision for what you're doing with that area, so I do understand. Numbers overall in Signpost I'm not going to focus on, because we did get this massive movement, which is really appreciated through both the Emerald team and Simon Powers, head of victim care. Numbers went up really high, it was looking good. They're starting to come down, and I do not think that is a change in culture in officers not wanting to do it. I think it comes back to a conversation around process and how tricky it is to do it because it's a system thing. So we're just going to continue getting into as many spaces as we can to re-explain that process bit more than the culture piece. It's probably worth me stopping to see if there's anything you want to reply to around ECOG or victim care.
Anything about that, Charlotte?
Yeah, if I talk a little bit about 11.3 and victim satisfaction, Claire, just to bring you up to speed, we have now identified a provider who will provide that IT solution for victim satisfaction, and as we've spoken previously, we'll make sure that there's due representation from the OPCC in terms of that build, because we can make it a bespoke product for us in terms of those questions and what it is that we're seeking to resolve. But in essence, it will work across various medium in terms of whether it be on your phone, email, etc. And so people have got that instant access to reply. You're right in saying it does take time to build. So in the meantime, by the end of this week, we should have a bespoke plan in terms of what that victim satisfaction looks like for us in that interim period. And it may be that we focus on thematics or geography, because as you know, our resources for that work is limited.
Yeah.
But we may just think, okay, this month we'll focus on victims of crime from a certain area or a certain crime type, so we can get a better sample to make some decisions upon. What we have been able to do, and we talked about it earlier in terms of some of that transition from our customer service team and looking at dissatisfaction linked to VCOP. Again, for July we focused on DA, and we identified 2 cases of dissatisfaction by victims of crime, both of the same nature, and they highlighted the officer's compassion, which is good and bad, because what it does do, it does fall in line with our identity as an organisation and the work that we're doing to support and be compassionate. So we've identified those 2 areas. Those 2 officers have been spoken with by their supervisors. They've been signposted accordingly to what our identity means and what that means to victims of crime.
Right.
11.5, Commissioner. Oh, sorry, 11.4 data trends.
Yes.
There's just 2 areas that I'm going to talk about just briefly. I'm not going to talk about stop search on this occasion because we do that quarterly, and then we'll pick up those figures there. The 2 areas that I'll highlight, one that we've already talked about is our FCC contact centre and the demand that comes through there. And again, just to reaffirm that in last month, my figures just skewed, but in the last month, so July, we had over 10,500 999 calls. Now that's the most we've had over the last year. That's a huge amount of calls that are coming into the system. They have to be answered, they have to be assessed, and then that does have a knock-on effect in terms of response, because some of those will require deployment. But that's the greatest number that we've had over the last year. And similarly with 101 calls, again, a very, very high month, the highest month that we've had since October. So that just highlights the trend in terms of calling into policing. But as the Chief Constable mentioned earlier in the closed session, we are not alone there. Other forces across the country and emergency services are experiencing the same demand.
What was the number for the one-on-ones?
The number for the 101s was, and I have to wait for my cursor to go above it. I'll have to come back to you. I think it was 17,000 101s for that month.
And do you know what the rough wait time is for people getting through on the one-on-one?
The 101s is so 999s in terms of answering calls. That's a national set figure of 10 seconds.
Okay.
The 101s is not nationally set, and that differs from force to force.
Right.
And again, so it's not a figure that you can make direct comparisons with.
Yes, yeah, so not for comparison purposes. So let's say if you go back to the 999 10 second, how much?
We aim to answer 101s within 30 seconds.
That's not the average wait time. We can get the average wait time.
Yeah, if I can get that. Well, so I get the targets. But so how do you come by the 30 seconds?
Completely pulled out of thin air. It's of no consequence or relevance to anything. It's,
right.
Each one is just done from very few forces actually have a target for large one-on-one calls. I think our average wait time, from memory, I think it's about 3.5 minutes. For 101.
Just 3 minutes.
Right.
And our average wait time for answering 3 lines, I think we answer normally around about 80% of them within the 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But we can get you the exact detail on that.
Yeah.
It's probably worth noting, isn't it, that in the previous session was a fairly significant amount of time on the control room and
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
through the detail, just in case people are listening, hearing that and wondering what the rationale is, and we're going to have to spoke meeting about it
Yes, indeed.
as well.
Sorry.
And then the only other area in terms of data trends that I'll reference is custody. It's not an area that we often talk about, but again it highlights the demands that the force faces, but also the productiveness of our frontline cops. So July saw the highest number of custody throughput for both Luton and Kempston over the last year. Now, if you break that down, what some of the real concerns there are children detained within police establishment. And again, we saw high numbers throughout both June and then July again. Number of children detained overnight was again very high, but the reassurance that I'll give you, Commissioner, is that each one of those is reviewed on a regular basis throughout the course of the evening and night. And of all of those that were detained overnight, in July there were no children that were remanded in custody. And again, that is subject to daily scrutiny in terms of necessity and proportionality in terms of that individual.
Do we have any rough idea of what these young people have been put in custody for generally?
Yes, I mean they will be detained for the most serious offences. So, for example, if and that's why I talk about proportionality and necessity. So, if a child is brought into custody or considered to be brought into custody for a low-level crime, we will seek alternative arrangements. However, there are cases whereby children, and if you think about a 16, 17-year-old may have committed a really serious offence, they do need to come into custody. And in fact, in June, one of those was for murder.
Right. Okay. Also, do you have any figures around burglaries?
Yeah, burglary. So as part of, I didn't know whether you wanted me to cover this as part of 15, but I'll cover it now. So burglary for us as a force is a good news story. So in terms of the number of offences that has been committed, that's seen further months of reduction. Now, so for this year to date, we have seen 252 fewer victims of residential burglary. Our positive outcome rate for burglary is also very, very strong, and we sit in that 10th nationally in terms of that solved rate. Now that's in part due to the dedicated response that we have of maids, but also in terms of that prevention, etc. Our community teams still have a great focus on residential burglary. We know that as an offence type, it's one that really impacts on our victims.
Yeah, yeah. Well, can I thank you and the officers for the excellent job you're doing on helping to get the figures down for the burglars, because obviously the the thought was that once the lockdown was lifted, it will go up as people now started to go out to work, but it's actually good to see that is not happening at all. So that is really fantastic to see.
If I could just take the opportunity as we start to get into students coming back to universities as well, that's one of the historic periods where we start to see an escalation in burglary offending as student accommodation in particular. So for any people that are watching that know friends that are going to university or have family members going to university, just to reiterate those safety messages around, take care of your valuables, make sure you lock your rooms when you're there, close your windows when you're going out in the warm weather and stuff like that. So just the basic crime prevention advice, and link into us in our community teams if you want some additional support and advice around property marking and things that we can do to dissuade that and keep driving down.
Okay, that's brilliant. And then we'll move, are you finished with your session? Oh, Sean. Okay, great. Then move on to 11.5. I think that would be, that's you again, Sean.
That's me.
No,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
So
Yes.
I'll pick that up. Just a few statistics really, Chair. We've been working on trying to get a format of reporting that comes to this board that will also go to the Chief Constable's board, and you can also use for Police and Crime Panel, so that the information is static for all three forums, which has now come out to you for this time round. Next time round there'll be a current report for that. So we've now got a static way of reporting across those three forums. But in terms of figures, so our target for police officers for the financial year 21-22 is a headcount of 1,384, and we need to achieve that to maximise our 4 level of uplift grant from the government. Our forecast at the moment sits at 1,453, which is 69 over where we need to be, which is really, really positive. It does mean that we'll have an overspend on our pay budget, but as I've reported previously in the private section, we will be underspent as a force overall. We're expecting for 22-23 to have a target of 72 increase set to us by the government, and if we end up 69 over at the end of this year, then obviously we will near enough meet that target from day one, which is a real positive place to be. Fits in with your police and crime plan very neatly, and also allows us to reduce the number of student officers we put through the new national scheme, PEQF, which is a qualifications framework, which allows us to understand that process a lot better as it goes in the other forces. We've just recently, this month, 2 days ago I think, had our latest intake of the Detective Constable Programme, which is our direct route into our Detective Constables, and we saw 17 coming into there, and a very high number of those are female. I actually think, I'll clarify, but I actually think 16 of those 17 are female, which is a really interesting statistic. We've got 6 intakes remaining, so we're looking at bringing in another 118 officers over those 6 intakes, which will get us to that position I mentioned earlier. We've got a pool of around about 400, of which 42% of those are female, and 15% are visible Black, Asian, and from minority ethnic backgrounds. I'll come back.
Detectives as well, or just?
So that's that 40 of those 118 will be detectives, and the pool sits at around about 100 for those. I've mentioned the new qualifications framework, and we're running a pilot, 2 intakes this year as part of that pilot. It is causing us a bit of concern at the moment, so it's an area that we just need to dig into. There's a hell of a lot of interest around it, which is really, really positive, but we're not seeing people fulfil their application. So they're starting an application but not submitting it. So we're just looking into that, why that may be. And we're also seeing for those that are being submitted, a high level of rejection coming back from the university. So we're just working with the university just to understand why that is happening. But we still think we'll achieve our full intake on that course. I guess key points and just a couple of bits that just raised here. So overall our officers in terms of our black, Asian and minority ethnic look at about 10% representation, and it's hovered around that for some time. So I'm just conscious that we're not making headway on that. We're looking to increase from 10% upwards. We are seeing some issues around occupational health in terms of capability and capacity to deal with a number of recruits that are coming through, so we're just looking at addressing that because it is having an impact on our, if I can use for brevity, the term BAME for the moment, just because we are seeing a greater number around BMI from our BAME capability, capacity, and we're not getting them through quickly the OH process. So we're just reviewing that, and that is not something that is new to us, it's happened before, so we just need to address that.
You read my mind.
Positively, on the attrition, we're seeing on average between 7 and 8 per month leave the organisation. I say positively, that's obviously a negative, but in terms of what we were forecasting between 10 and 11 a month. So a big improvement, which is a big attributor to why we think we'll end up in a better position at the year end in terms of over-establishment.
So what period of time is this that you're talking about?
So this is between April and July.
Right.
And what we'll be doing from here on in, Festus, is bringing you the preceding month's data.
So how many do we end up left in July?
How many?
How many staff or officers have left in July?
In July, just bear with me.
Compared to June?
So, in June, just bear with me because I've got these figures.
6 officers, 18 staff, 1 special for July.
So that's 24,
25,
25 in July.
but only 6 officers.
Yeah, so I'm focusing on officers when I talk about attrition.
It's really high for staff there. Was there a particular, because staff isn't normally that high, was there a particular event? There are resignations when you look at the next chart.
Was
They're not
17 resignations?
17 resignations for that was, I think, that's officer staff and police assessors. There's a breakdown for what number of resignations were there.
I will come back to you on police staff, because as I say, in terms of officer numbers, the attrition has been 6 in April, 5 in May, 10 in June, and 7 in July.
How did the exit interviews go for the officer exit interviews that you were starting? Was there a theme on those ones?
So the reasons for leaving are there in terms of whether it's resignation or whatever. What I haven't given you, and because we said we'll bring it back in January, is the detail around the exit interviews. So in January we'll bring you back the detail around those.
So
Yeah,
for
I
this-
know during the full report, which is one of the
They're very similar themes to the ones we've seen previously. Didn't understand the job, didn't understand the what it involved and what it entailed, etc.
So are they new, they're student officers going?
I think those ones, there's brought up the last student officers that are in it.
So of those 6 that left in July and the 8 in June, how many of those proportions generally get an exit interview? I know that they will all get offered one.
Yeah.
How many tend to take
If
one?
those student officers will have a bespoke intervention with the student development team anyway. We'll
Yeah.
sit down with them in advance, and even before, if it looks like we think they might be applying, going for resignation, then we'll intervene before that and try and understand what their concerns are and address those. But we will try and then proactively ensure that we get an exit interview with all of them. Again, we don't always achieve that because they don't always want to participate in it.
So do we know roughly how many tend to
We have got the numbers up before. but
No, I've got the notes here.
So can I
hand, but we can get this for you.
Can I ask then if I can get I mean, I understand that we can't force people to talk, you know, if they don't want to talk. I understand that, but it would just be nice to have an idea how many take up the offer and how many don't. Then we can start looking at why that might be the case. Also, for the specials that have left, do they get exit interviews as well?
Similar to the officers, they're offered an exit interview. So
Yeah.
we can work out, I'll give you the details. for
Yeah,
us.
that would be really good.
Yep.
That would be really good.
Who does those exit interviews? Because the ones that have contacted us haven't had them.
I'm not sure. I think that would be
Susie Carr and Mark Farron, under the new
Under
structure.
the new. So
Right.
ones that have left previously might not have, but anyone
They
from
might
now
not,
have that.
yeah.
those figures. Because obviously, a very, very central part of the policing crime plan is the improvements on the retention rate for the force. And obviously, with this many officers coming in, the net gain is just that much better if we're able to keep more of them. So we could keep an eye on this.
I mean, we will absolutely, I agree with you entirely. It's worth noting that as an organisation, we have the highest level of proportion of our workforce with less than 3 years service, which is currently around about 35%.
Yeah.
When you then look at the national trends, it's recognised that the vast majority of turnover in policing comes within the first 3 years of service. So we are going to have a legacy for a period of time of a higher level of leavers than we ordinarily anticipate because of the proportion of our workforce with less than 3 years service. So it will appear high, but it will be consistent with other forces in terms of their levels. It's just they've got a smaller proportion of their workforce.
Given the fact that I don't want to take that as a given, but as an automatic thing, I mean, can you just give me any kind of some kind of assurance that as a force, we are putting everything we can
We are absolutely, yeah.
to, because for me, I've met some of them, as you all have, and they're all very enthusiastic, and you know, they genuinely love the idea of being in uniform and going out to do their first shifts, and it just because it will be quite sad that for whatever reasons that we don't fully understand, they just, you know.
We've got a huge amount of effort since we identified the trend of leavers going through their student period into the student development officers and the teams to support them. So we've got those interventions going in sooner, so we're losing fewer people on Reg 13 and fewer people with their student period on resignations. We were, at the start of Uplift, quite concerned to the Uplift programme in terms of the number of people that we're losing. We're probably still concerned in terms of the number, but actually we're in proportion to everywhere else as a result of the interventions that we made. We'll keep making those through the student development officers and the team that we've got with the Green Room team.
Well, it'll be very good to see the trend then in January, Phil, as we initially agreed back in May. So hopefully we're able to see a downward trend in that. Great. I think that is pretty much it for 11.5. Unless anyone has anything want to add to that. Okay. No? Okay, then we go to agenda number 12 on the agenda, which are issues that have been raised with me. One that I would like to just flag up is around parking at the Luton Police Station. I have tried and failed on parking. Yeah, not to park, but to find parking. I have no issues with parking my car. It's just finding a space to park in. Obviously, it's a healthy problem to have in the sense that we've got more officers and more personnel coming into our buildings, but the capacity is an issue. And hopefully that will kind of fit into the 10-year estate review that we did as well. Do we have any plans on how we can maybe mitigate this a little bit? Maybe even working with the local authority a little bit more?
So, parking is a long-standing issue. It's a problem which dogs not just us, but probably every police force everywhere in all the ones I've worked in. Parking obviously isn't right for our officers and staff, albeit it's one that we recognise because of the hours that they work and some of the risks that they face. Practically, we'd like to be in a position where we can provide parking on site because we recognise that's the best thing. Obviously, we've spoken about the budget in advance of this. Any parking provision over and above that we currently have is likely to come with some sort of cost element because our local authority partners aren't sitting in a position where they've got loads of free space that they can give away for nothing. So we've entered into arrangements previously with partners at relatively modest costs, but actually when we're under pressure on the budgets that we have, we've had to step away from some of those. So we are certainly always alive to the fact that parking is an issue for our staff because it gets raised with us every RC executive, I'm sure, and it gets raised whenever we're out and speaking to people, particularly at Luton. But we are looking at how we can possibly have a bit of an innovative solution to Luton, but that will require some investment in terms of building a provision, and we will always remain committed to engaging with partners if there's any availability to come forward in the financial provision that we've got. But it
NCP, just to see what they can do, what they can assist with. He's got some costings, as the chief says, it will come at cost. He's going to prepare a paper on that, so we can have a look at that in terms of the revenue cost that will be, and we need to look at that alongside the other options, which will be capital cost, to see what we can do. So hopefully we should have a paper on it shortly, but as the chief says, we'll need to look at that in the overall financial context.
I totally get that cost. I just think we need to look at value as well in terms of cost spending an hour at the end of their shift moving cars to get out. That isn't good in terms of value.
Yep.
It's just, I know it comes up at your RC execs, but it comes up regularly to us wherever we go, and we get it, and we understand that it's difficult in all the different estates, but there especially seems to be really.
Yeah, it's under enormous pressure. Yeah, it is.
And just one last one I want to just raise again. Now, we mentioned this during the closure, but I think it would be fine to reiterate this, and for the benefit of those who might be watching around business and retail crime. I think you shared some really interesting thoughts about the force's position on how the police basically provide business support. So do you mind just highlighting that again in terms of what we do or what we don't?
Yeah, happily. And there is something of a misconception that we will not tend shoplifters. Now, obviously, we all know that we have pressures on our resource, like very many public services, and we have to prioritise the allocation of that resource. So if it is a single occasion, low-level shoplifter, it may be that when you report that to that, we record the crime and then we'll file that without any further inquiries. If we don't have somebody that's available to attend. At the other end of that, if you are, multiple occasions where you have had a gang of people targeting your business premises and stealing things on a regular occasion, then we would be looking to deploy our community teams to work with you on a sustainable problem-solving approach to tackle the problem that's there through a range of measures, both in terms of prevention but also proactive enforcement. And ACC Badger gave an example earlier on where we've got currently a retail area within the town where that's actually attracting the highest level of force priority and ensuring that we allocate force resources to deal with the problems that are there. But all of our approaches are predicated on what we determine as threat, harm and risk. So if something is a significant threat, is creating significant harm or creating significant risk, then we will prioritise our resources and allocate them accordingly. So if it is high loss, high harm, high frequency, that would attract a higher degree of response than it would do if it was single occasion, low loss, no prospect of effective investigative outcome. But the myth, I'm very happy to debunk, is that we do not attend shoplifters. We will do, and we will do that on the basis of threat, harm and risk.
And if a shop owner was to have CCTV footage of a crime taking place, they've got the face, the whole lot, but obviously by the time they've called the shoplifter or the attacker, they've fled.
Yeah.
How would they be able to provide that intel to the police, or do they have to wait for the officers to turn up to collect the information?
So there are ways to submit evidence online through our portal. They're still in development. We use them mostly for road traffic collisions and dash camera submissions at the moment. But we have got some software in development at the moment called DAMS, which we don't yet have a finalised date for. But failing that, then officers can attend. They can secure the imagery on their body-worn video in the first instance if people are reluctant to give us the equipment if it needs a download from the hard drive or whatever. But we can secure that imagery in a range of different ways and then circulate that to identify the person responsible.
Do we have anything in place at the moment that allows, say in that instance, for example, when an officer comes to the premises, they take the evidence, do we have anything in place that allows the force to be able to provide feedback, either by text or by email or something, to a victim of crime whilst the crime is being investigated at all?
So the investigating officer should be in a position to link in with the victim and give them feedback throughout the course of the investigation, and certainly at the conclusion of the investigation to let them know what the outcome of that is.
Right. Okay. All right. That's all from me. We've got the every monthly performance on number 13 of the January.
The papers within the documents, rather than going through the entire document, I know that you're well cited and very supportive of the excellent work of the Veru. What I will just highlight is we spoke in last month as a result of the tragic incident in Luton, that in June referrals went up. So in May the referrals into Veru were at 12 during the calendar month. In June they went up to 21, which is a very positive note that people are reaching out and speaking and seeking that support. That has continued into July. In July I saw 20 referrals come into the Veru. So they're very active and seen as a really good opportunity by the community to intervene and divert some of our young. And as you're well cited, that throughout the whole month of July and into August during the school holiday period, they've continued their work out in the community and reached lots and lots of people in different forms. So they're a very busy team, but the full paper is within the paper.
Yeah, I've got to just thank you and the other teams that work with in the Veru for the really often unseen work that they do in our communities, and I know it's an uphill task, but they do a good job, and I just want to just thank them for everything that they do. Of course, in an ideal world, I wish we could guarantee the funding for the Veru every year for the next 3, 4, 5 years. But I just want to go on record that, for my part, when I was at Downing Street a couple of weeks ago, this issue did come up about how it's absolutely crucial that we have a longer-term funding arrangement for this kind of early intervention program, because we can't be doing it on a yearly cycle. It's just too disruptive, given the nature of the long-term work that they do. But I just wanted to thank them for everything that they do. If you can pass that on for us, workshop, that would be really appreciated.
Without doubt, Commissioner, you will know that we've had the independent evaluation from the University of Cambridge into our Veru. And whilst we're giving the sharing recognition, if I just pick out 2 sentences that came out of that evaluation. First of all, it was that they were universally well regarded by all parties. And we appreciate that they work in a really tricky environment between police, between the community. And then the second part was they were so impressed and saw that the passion that they had, and not only that they had, that it spreads to all that they come into contact with. So yes, I'll reinforce the recognition that you shared.
Thank you. And then to number 14, September meeting.
So this is our request for the next meeting, where we will give notice about what area it is, and we'd like to look at witness care in terms of, we all understand the massive gap that's been caused with the court backlogs, but what we don't understand is the impact yet. Talking to officers with open cases of long periods of time, they're not seeing people drop yet, but they are predicting that it will happen. So it's just, could we get as early as we can to look at what is that provision that we've got? Is there anything that you've got in the pipeline that you're considering before we as an APCC have a look? So just doing that early work, if possible, please. And then 15, Commissioner, if I can, is around the information agreement that we wanted. We're about there in style with how we were going to do it. It's just about now putting it out every month. A lot of the items are quarterly, so they'll come out in the next month and will go on our website so the public has got easier access to the information. Some of that information was already out in various forms, it was just difficult to obtain and understand. With it, it would be a lot easier if the force fills it in and we upload it every month. At the minute, we've got papers coming in and we're doing it. We just need to be really careful because it's around information around what goes out. So I would suggest the former is the better idea, but we can do the latter. It just might cause some issue. But from September, we'll have all of that available. The draft is up now on our website.
Was there a difficulty with using the template? Is there a difficulty with that?
I don't think so. I think it's just the varying ways and times that the information comes out has probably caused issue around filling it in. But we might want to give it a go for next time. So
We'll just keep working together and find.
Brilliant. That is it, really. Thank you very much for everything that you do, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Thank you.